Parks and Recreation, running on the beach.
Jeanette Nikovich, Care, and new Y board member.
Congratulations.
Kickball.
Robert Heimer, living and working in Haven, on slide staying with Sunset.
Teacher Robinson, YMCA at the USA, and baby baton.
Say it again, I'm sorry.
A baby baton.
Baton, nice.
Alicia Santilli, I live and work at Care. Well, I don't live at Care. Sometimes I live in the East Shore, work at Care, and probably kickball in the streets.
Christian Engel with YMCA, running with my sister.
We're just saying our name, where we're from, and our earliest fond recollection of having been physically active as a youngster. I'll ask everybody who's just walked in to do that as well. Go.
Very good, cycling, skateboarding, and various skateboarding senses.
I work for the Y, and first recollection is really swinging and swinging and swinging on my skates.
You guys want to say your names? Just tell us their names, the two folks who just walked in.
Jerry and Cuba Lions.
What is your earliest recollection of being active, physically active as a young kid?
Probably playing softball.
Okay, great. Is that everybody? You can say hi, Barbara.
Oh, hi, I'm Barbara from the Y. Earliest recollection, kind of dodged my brother.
Throw it over to you, man.
Hi, I'm Doug, Director of Transportation for City New Haven. My earliest recollection was diving head first into a baiting pool at 2. Tomas?
Huh?
Name?
Tomas Reyes.
Why you're here?
What's your job?
I'm representing the mayor. I'm chief of staff for the mayor.
Earliest physical activity memory.
From your youth, as a little kid, will you remember being active in some way?
I don't think you all want to hear it.
Yes!
Well, that's perfect. Well, again, thank you everybody for coming out tonight. I just want to say, first of all, thank you. A special thank you to our partners, CARE, the Central Coast YMCA, Young New Haven Hospital. All of this sort of started back in December of last year when 3 of us went down, or 10 of us, however many, went down to Dallas and heard Mark speak. And we all looked at each other immediately and said, he's got to come. And so a lot of lifting happened by CARE and by the YMCA to bring him here tonight. And in order to kick off the evening officially, I want to say a few things. One, there's food and drink in the back. Please eat up. Every meeting should have this sort of food. It's amazing, healthy food. Wherever it's from, it's great. 2, we have some walking, biking, and cycling, walking, biking, and driving pledges over here for safe behaviors. Please take a look at them and fill them out. And 3, don't forget to bundle up when we go out there. It is a little bit nippy. So thank you for coming out on such a very cold night. So to start off tonight, I'd like to introduce Tomas Reyes, Chief of Staff for Mayor Hart, as well as former President of the Board of Alders and representative to Ward 4 in the Hill. Tomas.
Thank you all very much, and I'm really happy to be here representing the mayor. The mayor is currently in New York City with Mayor de Blasio and about a dozen other mayors from throughout the country, thinking about ways in which cities can be more livable and enjoyable by most. So she's probably doing something similar to what we're going to be doing here. I had a prepared speech that was written for me, but I'm not going to do that because I think I do better on the cuff. There's a lot of activity going on around here, and those of you that are in our neighborhoods know that. We have an opportunity here to talk through what is your vision of this neighborhood. And I remember when we were discussing the Route 34 West project, that there was some degree of controversy. We want everybody to remember that that was a project that was begun with the last administration. We basically had to make it happen because there had been some financial commitments. But if you remember, those of you that came to the public hearing that was held here at this particular place in the auditorium, remember that the mayor committed to having community meetings to talk about the remainder of the Route 34 parcels that are available. This is a great time to start thinking about what it is that you'd like to see there. And I would hope that this exercise will really inform and help people make a decision, and your voices will be heard. And I think that this is an example of how this administration really wants to hear what people think so that we can act accordingly. Thank you very much for being here, and I'm going to excuse myself, not right now, but I can't go on the walk because since the mayor's not here, I have to represent her on the other side of town for another meeting. But enjoy yourself.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Quick pause and acknowledge Alder James for Ward 3. Thank you for being here, Alder James. Alder Nicola from the East Shore is going across the way to the Board of Education. So thank you, Alder Nicola. Karen Gilbard, Director of City Plan, is here. And joining us later in the walk will be members of the Police Department, Giovanni Zinn, our City Engineer, folks from LCI, and folks from the Community Service Administration. So thank you to everyone who came out tonight in the frigid cold again. Without further ado, I'd just like to introduce Christian Engel from the Central Coast YMCA.
Thank you, Doug. So again, before we get started, we do need to acknowledge Doug as well. Doug Housladen came on board with the Y about a year ago, as you mentioned earlier. And as we do roll now as Director of Transportation, Parking for the city, he's really jumped in with both feet with us, and we really appreciate your support in this endeavor too. So thank you, Doug.
Of course.
So from the YMCA's perspective, this started about, actually, I need to step back and put my Y hat back on again real quick. From our standpoint, I think make sure we recognize our CEO, David Stevenson, here with the YMCA as well. So thank you, Dave, for doing that. So for the Y, this started about a year ago for us. And I can go back in time, but I'll focus on the last year where the Y really got involved with an organization called Get Healthy Connecticut. Get Healthy Connecticut is an organization that has come together of people from the health department, local agencies, CARES involved with it, of really trying to figure out how we can help our communities understand, A, what it means to be healthy, but also what the opportunities are to be healthy. And so we've spent the last year really trying to educate the community on what's available. We've got a website that's up there I would encourage everybody to go to, gethealthyconnecticut.org, that lists all the different opportunities there are for people to get healthy within the city of New Haven and its perimeters. So the next step in that for us was, well, now we need to figure out how do we engage our communities in the next step. And that's what tonight's focus is. What does it mean to have, little walkable streets and to have healthier communities and healthier parks? And where does that begin? And for us, that meant bringing in Mark Fenton. As Doug alluded to, at least from my standpoint, my first visit with Mark was in Dallas, Texas a year ago. Mark has been involved with YMCA on a number of projects over the years. And this is the latest for him. And so we're excited to have Mark come into town. Mark is a health planning and transportation consultant. He's an adjunct associate professor at Tufts University. He is a former Olympic race walker. So he has all the acronyms down on what it means to be healthy, what it means to have walkable cities. You can't participate in the Olympics if you don't have the ability to walk, so you gotta know where to go and what to do. He is a graduate of MIT. And so we're really excited to have Mark here. Just his energy and enthusiasm that he brings to this is exciting. And for those of us that spent some time with him a year ago, obviously it was contagious because we wanted more and brought him back in for tonight. And knowing that it's going to be 28 degrees, we're really excited about it. So with that, Mark, I'm going to turn it over to you to take us off for tonight.
So you didn't have to tell him the race walking. That was it undermines any credibility I might have had for you if you've ever seen race walking. We can talk about that another time. We won't be race walking tonight, I promise. So what I'd like to do is take a couple of minutes to set some context, but our real goal, there's really three things that'll happen tonight. One, a brief, what I would call learning session, and I may say stuff you all already know, or I may say stuff you've never heard before, but I want to sort of level the playing field so that everybody in the room at least has a little bit of context. That'll be about 25 or 30 minutes. Then we're going to go out for a walk for as long as we can stand, basically, as long as we're comfortable out there. Try to feel the environment. And admittedly, some of you may live in, we won't be able to walk on everybody's street, right? That's not the like and what challenges us about it, so that we have real images in our mind. Then come back in. And the most important part is when we walk back in, it's an opportunity to start thinking about what I call the 3 Ps. Programmatic, project, which is physical infrastructure, and policy level changes that build the very community that Tomas alluded to, that it sounds like the mayor is embracing, and that I'm sure those of you who come to a meeting like this are very, very serious about. So in other words, if you're here, you're the kind of person that already cares and thinks about this, right? So I hope none of this is any new to you, but this is an opportunity tonight to actually talk about some specific next steps. New Haven, I'm from the greater New England area. I have family outside of Hartford. My parents both grew up in a town called Bloomfield, if that's familiar, small town northwest of Hartford. Both are UConn grads, so like deep roots from them. My grandfather's still up in that area. I'm in the greater Boston area. I know New Haven's history by that context. I know the sort of the ups and the downs and the challenges. Interestingly enough, there's a lot happening here right now. And I would submit to you that this is a window of opportunity. If you have an administration that's receptive to this stuff, if you have people like Doug in the position that he's in to be working on these kinds of things, it is a moment in time that you must jump on. If you have development opportunities like this 34 corridor, east and west, these kinds of things, right? So you've got Yale investing in sort of business incubators and those sorts of things. These are the moments you got to strike and get it right, because some of the decisions you're making now are 50 and 100-year decisions. Some of the infrastructure you build, you're stuck with for decades. Okay? So that's the big setup. Having said that, I'm going to tell you all the important stuff. Sorry for the small screen. You don't even have to see it necessarily. But if you're struggling, come up closer if you would like to. You're welcome to come closer. But here's the quick version of the story, my whole story. Because I come at this, although an engineer by training, I really come at it from a public health side, which is how I connected with the Y over a decade ago and the work I've done with them. And here's my quick version of the story. We know people should be physically active to be healthy. We know health and physical activity are closely related. We also know that we as a society, that is America in general, doesn't do enough. And we also know that having told people to exercise has not worked. We've tried it for 20 or 30 years. Those of us in health promotion, ask my colleagues at the Y, has telling people to exercise been effective at the population level? And the answer will be no. He shakes his head. You know, we get some people, but it doesn't work at the population level. What we also know is building communities that are supportive of healthy lifestyles does work. This is the big deal. This is why that entire meeting in Dallas happens. Why has embraced this premise that it's not just about what happens inside the walls, but that the very fabric of our communities dictates how healthy we are. Right? This should not be shocking to any of you to think about this, but we've got good evidence about it. Here's the other really compelling thing, and it's probably why the mayor's interested in this. What we find is the things you do to design a community to be healthier also yields benefits from an environmental health standpoint and an economic health standpoint. So we tend to see them have more vibrant and robust economies and more sustainable environmental settings. The very things I would tell you to do to make the street more walkable tends to be better for the environment and for the local economy. Okay? So we can talk more about each of those if it interests you, and then I will suggest to you that we get there by doing what I alluded to before, the 3 Ps: programmatic, the encouragement, the education, the outreach stuff, but more importantly, physical infrastructure, building it the right way, and making our policies so that that's the way we build it all the time. So we could go out and fix one sidewalk at a time, but we could make it our policy that anytime we touch a road, we fix the sidewalk too, right? Those are two very different things, right? Doing the individual projects, onesie-twosies, or making the policy such that anytime we touch a roadway, we figure out, can we make it better for bicyclists and pedestrians too? Got it? Okay, so that's the setup. If you only came for dinner and to nap, you can put your head down on the table now. You got the whole story. I gave you everything. But I have a few pictures to sort of. The reason I asked that opening salvo about our earliest recollections of physical activity, I want you to think about this for a minute. How many of you talked about things that occurred at a scheduled time and place? Raise your hand. I really want you to raise your hand if you're. How many were thinking largely about things where you had to have an adult present? How many thought about things where you were only with kids of the same age and gender as you? Same age and gender. Okay, a few of you. How many had to have a uniform when you did? How many had to have an umpire or a referee? Okay, how many thought of things that you did with kids of different ages and different genders? It might have been older kids and younger kids playing together, boys and girls, whatever you can get your hands on to get a kickball game going. Some of you were talking about kickball. How many remember not necessarily having an adult present? How many specifically recall doing things you could not have gotten away with if an adult had, in fact, been present? A lot of that, right? How many remember a wheeled vehicle being part part of that period in your life? It could have been a big wheel, but a scooter, a skateboard, a bicycle, a trike. Who had something with wheels on it that you used to get around? Raise your hand. What is with this? You guys are so dang lazy. Raise your hand. All I'm asking you to do is raise your hand. All right, how many remember water being part of it? Swimming in it, fishing on it, playing in a neighborhood creek, playing in the puddles on the street, or the fire hydrants, or a fountain. All right, put the hands up for water again. Just want to make a point. How many of you remember from that period of your life, to some degree or another, having been a free-range kid? Okay, let me use the term. Think about it. Who was kind of a free-range kid? I could take off on a Saturday morning and be told, come home at lunchtime, or dinner, or even in the summer, come in when the street lights came on. Did anybody have the street light? Last two questions are the only two that matter, so listen closely. How many believe the majority of kids in America today are free-range kids? Look around. Don't look at me, what do you guys think? Okay, last question. How many think it's good for the health of America's youth that we're raising a robust and healthy generation by virtue of them not being free-range? Good thing we don't have free-range kids anymore, Mark. Put your hands up for that. He does. He says, good thing we don't have free-range kids. Why? Okay, you were being contrary. Well, there are some, once in a while, somebody will throw up a hand. What's the one reason? If we ask parents, why can't you let your kid walk to school like Clark Fenton did from 3rd grade on, just with his friends, no adult? Why can't you let your kid take off on a Saturday morning and tell him to come home at lunchtime or dinner? God's sake! Oh my God, scary men with big thick mustaches are hiding behind every tree. Right? The mustache men are out there. And let me be very clear, I'm a parent of a now 16-year-old daughter, 18-year-old son. I understand there are places kids should not go unaccompanied. I understand there are streets where bad things happen, and spouses that were nervous when they walk by, right? But would you all agree that rather than throw our hands up in despair, maybe we should do something about it? That maybe we should fix those places? Indeed, I put to you, and will put tomorrow to the elected and appointed officials, and anybody else who can make the show up, staff, the fundamental question, if you accept that we were free-range kids, our kids are not, and it's probably not good for them, my fundamental question to you is this: what are you doing about it? Not just you, but everybody is you. Got it? What are you doing about it? I hope being here tonight is one of the things you're doing about it, because that's where I am on this. What are you doing about it, Chief of Staff? What is the mayor doing about it? Rhetorical question. Don't answer me. You can give me the soliloquy, I'm sure. Let me just be clear about the data on this. We talked about the nation's obesity epidemic. I think we're talking about the wrong thing. Let's talk about the nation's chronic disease epidemic. All right? Because what we are talking about is twin epidemics: physical inactivity and poor nutrition, that are driving up rates of things like cardiovascular disease, diabetes. We know a disease that we used to call adult onset diabetes. One of the physicians in the room, what is the actual clinical term for adult onset diabetes? Are you guys too young to even know that we used to call it that? You know what it's called? Type 2, right? But we used to. You guys don't even, this is mind-boggling. Literally, we have older clinicians who will tell you, oh yeah, when I was training, that was called adult onset. You thought you couldn't get it to the 40s, 50s, yeah. But these guys don't know that because they get presented with kids 9 years old with type 2 diabetes. 8 and 9, like the young lady on the front of the thing here. We're estimating that 1 in 3 kids born today will have type 2 in their lifetime. We want to crush the healthcare system. Don't talk to me about whether we have a single-payer system or a market-based system, whether Romney Care or Obamacare is a good or a bad idea. You're talking about that, you are totally missing the boat. What you should be talking about is the two things that are driving the bus on chronic disease in this country, which are physical inactivity and poor nutrition. Add one more risk factor, tobacco, and you've got it all. That's the story. If you could control those 3 things, you would take care of the rising healthcare, this healthcare cost problems we have. So let's make sure we're clear on that. Okay, I'm going to boil the physical activity study down, this stuff down to 3 numbers: 30, 20, 365. 30, 20, 365, 30. That's the minutes per day we're told every adult should be physically active. If you could get a half an hour a day of walking, you'd live a longer, healthier life. It would reduce your risk for cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, osteoporosis, clinical depression, dementia in old age, a growing list of cancer. In other words, every time another big study comes out, what we see is people who are more physically active live longer, healthier lives than people who are sedentary. That's pretty clear from the research. We know kids need more like an hour a day. These, by the way, are minimum recommendations. We know that there's what we call a dose response. That is, the more you do, the healthier you are. Okay? That's a good news. The other thing we know is it doesn't have to be structured exercise. Walking 15 minutes to the bus in the morning and walking back 15 in the afternoon, that would count toward your 30. Everybody get that? Which is important because it doesn't mean it's got to all be going to the gym. We could build a world where I could walk around that much as part of my daily life and be doing well. Sadly, the 20, well, that's a generous estimate of the percentage of Americans that actually meet those guidelines. 20%. That's mind-bogglingly low. Centers for Disease Control will tell you some higher numbers. That's based on self-report data. When they actually measure, not what you tell me in the telephone survey, when they put monitors on people's heads, it looks like maybe 1 in 5, probably more like 1 in 10 Americans actually meet these guidelines. We're in really bad shape on this front. 365, nope, not days of the year. 365,000 premature deaths annually due to physical inactivity and poor nutrition. Okay? So let's understand the scale of the problem. When we talk about making safer streets for walking, it's not a nice to do, it's a must do. Okay? It's a must do from a public health standpoint. Why is it so resistant to change? I call it the stickiness problem. In the short version of the story, I'm not going to belabor this. There's a lot of public health research around this and behavioral psychology and stuff. But the bottom line is simply telling people to exercise more has not worked. It doesn't stick. You can do great walking programs and you can put on events and you can have walk to school day and everything else. They're wonderful, but they have a kind of a short-term effect. This is a graph over 18 months of a walking program in which for the first 6 months everybody increased their exercise minutes per week, but you'll notice that it dropped off over time. And that shape, the only reason I'm showing you the graph also is that shape we see again and again in the research studies. Early success, I'm excited, I signed up, I'm on a weight loss program, I made a New Year's resolution, and I'm at it for a while, especially if you call me on the phone and send me reminder, give me t-shirts and water bottles, because we love to do that in health promotion, don't we? God knows how many t-shirts and water bottles you and I have given away in our lifetime. And it's great, but it doesn't stick, which leads us to the question of the night. How do I build a stickier world? That's really where we're at. How do I build a landscape that once we do have a great walking program at the Y or for a community program or for whoever's doing that, the behavior sticks because I've got such a walkable world out there, I can't not keep walking, right? So that's what I want us to do. Let's have a conversation. What does it take to build that sticky world? Questions so far. Does everybody understand how I've gotten to this point in the conversation? It's about building stickiness into our neighborhoods. Questions, comments, thoughts, protests.
One right quick there. Miss
Go.
Helen? Miss Helen?
No,
Ms.
she was
Helen?
just waving.
Oh, I'm sorry.
She was waving to do our
No
I
question
got
then. Thank you, Mike.
Okay, so here we're at. You should ask me, smarty pants, fast-talking guy, is there evidence you can build stickier communities? What are the things you gotta do? Fair enough. You can ask me that. Does anybody have a guess? What do you think? What do you think builds environments where people are more likely to walk, to ride a bike?
Interconnectivity.
Good connectivity. She just walked in the door and she was the first one to answer. Thank you very much. I like that. So having stuff connected, like good sidewalks, like a bike lane on the street, or a pathway, like the Farmington Canal Greenway Trail, or something like that. Any number of things like that. That's one. That's not enough. What else?
Perception of safety.
It's got to feel like it's safe. Indeed, it should be safe. Not just perceived, but we do know that perception and reality, there's some really interesting research on that. They don't always match up. And so we got to, it's the scary man with the mustache behind every tree. By the way, which one is the best deterrent? If we ask law enforcement, what makes the streets feel safer? Is it about lights? Is it about emergency phone call boxes?
People on the street.
People, eyes, eyes. The first thing they say, give me eyes on the street, all the others. In fact, call boxes, there's some debate about whether that makes people feel less safe because it suggests they had to put a call box here, somebody must have gotten caught. I don't need to kill you all. I'm not making light, I'm just saying, what this perception question is a very real one. It's a very relevant question.
You have data on that.
On the call boxes, I can check on some of my sources for that if you'd like it to be interesting. What else?
How about teaching drivers to let pedestrians cross?
I'm going to put that in the safety pot. Rather than pick out one person and make fun of them and say all drivers paint with a brush, because I can paint the same thing. How about let's teach bicyclists to stay in the lane and not cut left and blow through the lights? Well, I saw one bicyclist do that. Do all bicyclists do that? No, of course not. Do all drivers not yield? No, of course not. So, but her point is, let's make sure that the behaviors actually reflect, right, the civil and indeed legal obligations of all participants in the system. I'm going to still keep that under the safety pile. So we've only got two things, interconnectivity and safety. Give me something dramatically different than those. Purpose. Have a purpose, she says, which I'm going to say is have destinations. There's got to be stuff within walking distance, within bike distance. Good? Give me another.
I like the thing on the pole that tell you 20, 19, 18. That tells me I got enough time to run across.
Oh, the countdown timer.
Yeah.
Good. Oh, excellent. So she's saying the countdown timer's on the walk signals. Excellent. That's an element of my third element that we haven't talked about yet. Oh, when I get to my destination, do you like to come up at find a big giant parking lot and the building set way back if I'm a pedestrian? I'm walking, or would you rather the building's up the street and there's some benches and maybe some awnings, and if there is parking, it's behind the building, or maybe it's on-street parking? Which one feels better as a pedestrian? Yeah, and what I'm talking about is the details of site design, the actual details of how it's laid out at the micro level, whether that countdown timer's there, whether the building is at the street setback, where the bike rack is. The bike rack out back behind the dumpsters, or is it right out front, by the front door, visible, protected, and safe, so I don't feel like my bike's going to get vandalized. Yeah, and that's all part of what I'm going to call site design. That all falls in that category. So here's what I'm going to say. If you were to ask me to vastly simplify huge tons of research on this, I'm going to say 4 things. Mix of land uses, connectivity of the facilities, site design, safety and access for all. And for all, I mean people of all abilities and disabilities, somebody in a wheelchair, somebody who's visually impaired or blind, right? So, and I can draw pictures just from the day, just today and my previous visits to Maine that illustrate all of this. So we're talking about more compact neighborhoods and having neighborhood post offices and libraries and schools and shopping and open space, whether it's big Edgewood Park or whether it's this little triangle at Monitor Square there. There's a triangular park, not very big, but that shared green space become destination there, the shared front yard. So even if I don't have a big front yard in front of my house, there's a green space for me to go to walk to, take advantage of. Neighborhood stores. I was really intrigued by how many little bodegas and neighborhood stores I saw. Just in a couple of hours today, we went by literally dozens, every one of which is an opportunity to eliminate a car trip. If I can go pick up a quart of milk, if they happen to have fresh fruits and vegetables, I can pick up a healthy meal there. Now, if they don't, then I lose out on that, right, from a health standpoint. So that becomes part of the challenge. 2, the network of connectivity. Again, I can take all photos from here. Quality sidewalks, things like the Greenway Trail and other trails, things like your bike lanes and shared use arrows, and transit. Transit's important. I very specifically mention that because there are a growing number of research studies that tell us regular transit riders are more likely statistically to meet that 30-minute-per-day obligation. The very active walking to and from the bus at either end of your trip. Think about it, you only need 7 minutes at each end of the trip on both sides. You got 28 minutes and boom, I've got my half an hour a day. So, transit should be an active partner and an important target, an important goal in this kind of work. When we talk about the bike network, let us understand this. There are a range of bicyclists out there. And if we only design for the really skilled, high-intensity, serious bicyclists, then that's all that's going to be out there. So if we just, for example, things like shared use arrows. Some people, like Mr. Nutjob here, who's talking on the phone and has no helmet. You guys see this picture? No helmet, talking on the phone. Not my ideal sort of condition. But he's a very confident cyclist, is my real point. So he'll ride on a share road street. Some people will say that share road is not enough. It doesn't separate from the cars. It tells me the cars and I are sharing this lane. So I want a dedicated bike lane, or even what we're calling protected bike lanes, which is where there's a physical separation, a wider bit of striping, bollards, or something else. Sometimes even parked cars separate the bike lane from the active car lanes. What we find, this is important to know from some fairly recent research, you get a broader array of cyclists the more protected the bike lane is. Is that surprising to anybody? So less skilled, less self-confident cyclists will ride on trails, separated trails, or on protected lanes than will ride on just a bike lane on the street or a share lane. Everybody get that? So the more we want to get cyclists, the more we might think about building a network that includes some of those elements on primary corridors. How about the third thing we talked about? Site design. Building setback. This is the Stop and Shop. It's not that far away. Versus, any of the traditional sort of building at the street kind of designs. And the details of that matter. So when you get the building at the street, you have a clear walkway, things like awnings and street trees, benches. Those things we used to call aesthetics or amenities. But for my mom, 70-something years old, she's deciding whether to walk to the corner store or not. Hot day in the summer, if there's a bench underneath the shade tree where she can stop and take a break, she might walk to that store. There's no bench, no shade tree, and she's got to walk on a hot August day the whole way without a break, she maybe doesn't go. For her, it's not an amenity, you guys. It's a functional activity. Don't let somebody tell you bike racks are an amenity. Not to the person who's riding their bike and needs a place to park. Got it? I take that language out. When we design plans and things like that, we don't use the term amenities. They're just functional attributes, like for the bicyclist, just as the parking lot is a functional attribute for the motor vehicle. We wouldn't call this, hey, let's put an amenity out front for the cars, a parking lot. That's a nice amenity for the drivers. If we've got extra money, we'll put in a parking lot. That would be like heresy for me to say that, right? No, we're going to have 7 parking spaces for every 1,000 square feet of retail. Got a big parking lot. Huge, enough to land at 747, right?
Mark, have you counted how many parking garages?
Oh my gosh, you still got surface parking downtown, which still boggles my mind. I mean, their land value should be too high to have surface parking, let alone some number. Now, that doesn't change like this. That changes as more people live there, as you replace parking with people, right? So that I don't need to bring, you don't have to have cars come into that. So it's not an instantaneous change. We all get that. And there are going to be cars. People are going to still have cars. So we don't say it goes away. We just think about the scale and how we design it. Let me make an important point. This is a Walgreens from Portland, Oregon. Everybody see that up there? Now, that's up at the street. You can see street trees, and there's a nice parking. The parking area is small and visually screened. The entrance faces the sidewalk. There are benches here that serve a bus stop. Even if you don't see all that, you might agree with me that's not the standard Walgreens. That's not just, I walked by on George Street at Walgreens. It doesn't look like that. One that looked more like, yeah, this one from, I think this was over in Fairfield, somewhere nearby New England. But I had done a workshop over there, and I just didn't get a picture of the one here. Otherwise, I would have shown you yours and said, that's the standard Walgreens in America. I served for 6 years on my local planning board. They have a template. They come in, and this is what they want. I want a corner parcel. I want the building set back. I want all the parking out front. I need an extra curb cut entrance, not just for the parking, because what does the back of every Walgreens have to have now? Every pharmacy in America that we're building has to have one. Because God forbid Mark Fenton leave the seated position when he goes in to pick up his Lipitor prescription, right? You wouldn't want me to actually walk. No! I'd be able to drive right over to Dunkies and get a giant 800-calorie latte to have washed down my never leaving under your end. Okay, so you get my point. Let's just think of it. We're really designing only for the automobiles. Point I'm making here, right? We forget that somebody might show up with another mode. And the other problem with this is you say, Mark, that's Portland, Oregon. Which everybody knows is a communist enclave. They can do that stuff here in the United States. What's that? Oh, they got a lot more than streetcars. Oh my God, they have an amazing transit system. They have bike facilities everywhere. They got it all. So here's the deal. What about non-communist enclaves like Neenah, Wisconsin? This is not Madison, Wisconsin, which is in fact also a communist enclave. Neenah got the standard Walgreens. But Appleton, Wisconsin, next town over, also, we're not in the heartland of Wisconsin here. Regular community, not communist enclaves. They got that one, where the Walgreens is up at the street, and it's a much smaller parking lot, and they had to do the street trees and some pedestrian scale lighting and some of those other things. And my point in telling you this is, the easiest way to get this is to have this built into your ordinance, right? Say, you build the building here, not back there. You have this width of sidewalk, it's written right in. But when you go into a negotiation with the developer, what helps the planning staff and the planning board or city council, all the way, when they have to actually grant the permit and say yes, do the vote, what really helps to make sure that's the outcome you get in the lower left picture? It's not a rhetorical question.
You should be at the table.
Say it again?
You should be at the table.
Yes, ma'am. What were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say, to be fair, we did better in the Walgreens on Wayland Boulevard.
Good for you.
Had an overlay zone. And
So that it was in the ordinance.
yes,
Now, an overlay doesn't usually make it a requirement. Why did they opt into your,
our overlay didn't.
Oh, it wasn't
Design
part.
review didn't require it.
I got it. So they had to have at least this conversation. So is the building up, is the building down?
Building is up at the street, and the parking lot is up the street.
There you go. At the street is better than not. Well done. I'll try to get a picture of that.
You have design guidelines.
Yep. Yep. So my experience is this, that's step one, and then you still gotta give the support to staff and to the board, because you can waive stuff, or at least many communities, you'll see stuff get waived, particularly if you're dealing with the 900-pound gorilla, a big developer that says, I don't want it that way, my standard is. So for example, you've seen communities lower their parking requirements, we don't want giant season parking, and then Walmart, as an example, say, no, we want 7 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet. Even though you guys have gone down to 3.5, I'm making up the numbers, every community different, but you get my point, right? And they'll say, we want the development badly enough, we'll let you have your 7 or 6, you get my point, right? So good, glad you got review, you have it in ordinance, and then to your point, you're the one who said, then let's make sure we're there. So during the public testimony, they say, okay, public hearing, here we are, ready to either approve or not. This Walgreens, the developer wants to do this, we've recommended that, or staff has recommended that. We're right there, ready to do the vote. The great if a bunch of people lined up at the microphone and say, hi, Mark Fenton, 25 Crescent Ave. I just want to remind the board that although we're told every American adult should get 30 minutes of physical activity a day, fewer than 10% actually do, leading to 365,000 premature deaths a year. I'd really like us to build walkways that my daughter, who doesn't drive yet, or my mom, who doesn't drive anymore, can safely walk to the front door without playing Frogger across the parking lot. Indeed, I am more likely to spend more money at that Walgreens because I'll be comfortable and my entire family will be comfortable patronizing that store. I want to thank the board for the good work that you've done and staff for getting us to this design. Please stick to your guns and require that as well. Thank you. I did that in the required time, and I got in my 3 numbers. Did you hear that? But nothing, and by the way, no froth at the mouth, no bang the table. You're against development. Make the wacko who's going to do the screaming testimony look like the fringe person that they are. Come in, give thoughtful, calm, rational testimony. Have real people do it, not just the usual suspect, by the way. So just the Bike Alliance shows up. Talk about bike racks. I love them. I'm that guy. But they get marginalized because they're the bike guys. So does anybody understand what I'm saying about that? I mean, yes, they should be part of it, but they can't be the only people that show. Fair? Okay. Safety and access, that's the last one. I won't even detail this, but let me just tell you as an engineer, I've got to defend my brethren on this. There are some amazingly good tools in the toolkit now to make safe places where bicycles, pedestrians, motor vehicles, transit can coexist. We know how to design roundabouts the right way, and mid-block crossings and curb extensions. These are all tools in the toolkit. Indeed, one of the coolest things that's happening all over the country is we're reassessing these 4-lane roads, of which there are plenty across the country, and yes, here in this region. Big 4-lane roads that we thought would carry more traffic, we realized as we've done analysis that much of the things that governs how much traffic is not the number of lanes, but what happens at the intersection, signal lights and things like that. And indeed, in many communities, these kinds of roads, by the way, huge problems, which is every time I go to make a left turn into this establishment, I've got to cross 2 lanes of traffic. First car yields to me, second one doesn't, boom, we've got a collision. Or I stop to make that left, somebody hits me from behind, or tries to go around and creates a delay or a collision. In other words, they're fraught with challenges that we didn't really foresee. And the upshot is, when this road was going to be repaved anyway in Urbana, Illinois, they decided to go from 4 lanes back down to 3, 1 lane in each direction with a center turn lane, with a series of intermittent islands like this one, designed to protect pedestrian crossings. And because they've now got the extra space, 1 lane is gone, they've got a bike lane on either side. It's called a road diet sometimes. We're hearing that term being used around the country. A 4-to-3 conversion. Wait for it. Carries just as much traffic. Flows are smoother, fewer collisions. That's all just the car stuff. So they should do it just for cars. They did, but it also gives you the bike lanes and the improved pedestrian crossings. I want to be very clear. Do not let engineering staff tell you this is a bad idea because it's just for bikes and pedestrians. In many cases, it can be the right call for the motor vehicle. Got it? Questions? And by the way, under no circumstances, just so noted, who's here in engineering? Is anybody in engineering staff? Okay. I am not saying every 4-lane road should be converted to a 3. I want to just don't. I'm not throwing you under the bus.
We love this stuff. It's come.
But I just want to say, if he comes out and says this, because here's what's going to happen. Tell me what the businesses along this corridor said when they talked about doing this.
I need the customers. I need the customers.
Steam actually came out of one guy's ears. And he's like, oh, you're going to kill us. You're going to take a lane away. How can as much traffic get to my store as used to? Right? Now, the engineer there did the analysis and said, geez, we're going to solve the collision problem. It's going to be actually easier for people to turn left into your store. Blah, blah, blah. Made all that case. Guy didn't want to hear it. Starts a blog. He tried to undermine this project. And all you need is 1 or 2 people for the newspapers to grab onto that and say, oh, huge controversy over Philo Road. There's a massive opposition. 2 guys doing a blog. That's all it takes. So that's why we have to establish this larger group of rational, calm people. Remember the guy who stood at the microphone a moment ago? To be ready to say, my understanding is the engineering department has done an analysis that this will carry just as much traffic. They'll actually see fewer delays, fewer collisions, and be much safer for all users, including bicyclists and pedestrians, people who want to get to these stores that can't come by car. Just somebody who comes on the bus and that bus drops them off on the other side of the street, by the way, falls in that category, right? Questions, thoughts, comments on that? You want to add anything to this? Am I giving a fair shake to this?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, this is what we're doing. Road diets is something we definitely.
And you're ready. You're ready for the. You need the
We're ready.
backup. You need the backup.
I know. We appreciate that.
So I don't know whether Derby is a candidate road for it or not. We were just out there today. It was. Am I remembering? There's a school not far from here, park, science center. Is that where we were when I was like? Anyway, my point is, in many cases, it's about paint on these kinds of roads. right? And what happens at signal lights, I mean, there's other stuff. I don't mean to trivialize it, but I will say this. One of the great ways to do this is opportunistically. When we're out there paving the road anyway, when we have to dig it up to do sewer work or a water line, that's the time to reassess, okay, when we put it back down, might we want to change it to one of these, okay? Is this very end?
Route 34.
It's 34. You're the west of. Yeah, westbound. When it's come back together though, where it's too wet, right? You're 34 at the two-way section. And maybe that's, I'm not even saying that's a good road for it. Although I gotta tell you, man, we're seeing these on very high volume roads. It used to be that, oh, a road with 20,000 vehicles a day, 22,000 can't do it. They're working. So, but we saw others today. By the way, Edgewood, we rode down Edgewood. My understanding is there's at least the proposal for a protected bicycle lane, some realignment happening here. And I've just got to tell you, what we're seeing lots of good data from places that have done them on roads like this. So the idea would be potentially take away a parking lane, put a bicycle lane here, move the parking out to actually protect that bike lane. Can you picture this? So it's bike lane against the curb, parking lane out here, and then the two travel lanes. And just to give you a sense, there's a picture of that kind of a treatment. All right, that's what it would look like. Bike lane. When you're ready for this, this is a two-way bike lane here. And my understanding is Connecticut state law does not allow you to do it that way. You don't have the bikes going one way here, which is silly if you've got particularly the protection of a buffer strip and the parked cars there. So, go.
Where is that?
Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. But I've got pictures from all over the U.S. You want to see Pittsburgh, you want to see Knoxville, Tennessee. I mean, these are going in all over. You don't have to just look in New York to see it. Yes, ma'am? So this is out by which school is that?
Edgewood School is there on the
That's
left.
It is. So the Edgewood School.
Edgewood School.
Yeah, you're
So
looking-
we're looking east here.
Yeah.
It is two-way, and and we haven't come in, right? We're beyond the boulevard section with the big median. We're west of that. Right. And by the way, lest you think we're shooting from the hip and we're just talking about the wacky people, and because God knows Washington D.C. are not necessarily our. Anyway, so set that aside. There's an association called the National Association of City Transportation Officials. I guarantee you, some of the mayors that your Mayor Harp is with right now in New York City represent the cities from whom the transportation officials got together to talk about what are the best practices, how do we do this stuff, what have we tested around the country, so what do we have evidence about, and this is an example of that. So this is called the NACTO, National Association of City Transportation Officials Urban Street Design Guide, that talks about how to do this stuff. So here are these four elements. What I wanted to say to you was, one, we have the research that says these four things matter. They make a stickier world. If you build this stuff, they will in fact come. We see more people walk, bike, take transit in environments that have these. There's enough of this kind of research. And you have good examples of opportunities of that right here. And in fact, I'm not going to talk about that. What I want to show you is the 3 Ps are programmatic ideas, which are the idea of the encouragement, the education, the outreach, getting people to show up at public meetings, for example. Try it. Have a bike to work day, walk to school day. Those are good. They're not enough. They're not sticky. They're the things that afterwards, not a lot of change in behavior. So now you've got to change the infrastructure with projects, but better yet would be to change the policies, like the design guidelines, like roadway design guidelines, like the zoning ordinance, so that this is what you get all the time. That's the gold standard. That should be your goal. Don't just fix one thing. Have that be the model, the rule, going forward. I'm back over to Milton. Is it called Milton? No, Monitor Square, right? Monitor Square, the triangle there. We came up to that. It was really cool, nice little green square. We talked about sort of how might you do the 3 Ps around this. We said, well, let's program it. Let's have events there. Let's imagine music in the park, or maybe a dog event, if there are dog walkers that go there. Maybe we make a little dog park section. Who knows what? Maybe local bands perform. Maybe a food tasting thing of ethnic foods from that neighborhood, or whatever you might do. But the reality is there's a lot of open asphalt there. And in fact, as we were there, we saw, there was a picture of a car parked right in that crosswalk, which I covered up there, unfortunately. So you can't see the crosswalk. That poor guy. But when we stood there and hovered by the car for a long enough time pointing at it, the guy pulled the car back to me. He was stressed out. And now, but my point is, you could make it impossible to park a car here or to stick one in here with fairly modest measures like big planters or temporary curbing material that could be removed if we don't like it, or paint and removable bollards. I'm showing you these because in as much as we want to do sort of guerrilla style improvements in neighborhoods, These are the kinds of tools that are being used around the country to test out ideas like this, which are fundamentally reversible. Okay, so if it turned out to be a disaster and traffic didn't work in your neighborhood because of this, you take it out. But I would urge you to speak up for these kinds of ideas. Other examples are, this is actually called a parklet, and what did they call the ones that you put in here?
Terraces.
Terraces. Put one parking space. These are 1 or 2 parking spaces. This was built by a vocational school near Montpelier, Texas. The kids at the VOTAC built this beautiful wooden structure that has become a little downtown park. It's right adjoining the coffee shop. So people get your coffee, you sit out there, and they say it's livened up this entire section of the street at the expense of 2 parking spaces. And by the way, built a relationship between the Chamber of Commerce and this VOTAC school that never existed before. It's a really cool example of sort of a dynamic, I think. So that's the infrastructure project. Now what do I want? What I want the policy to be is that's what we do with the hog park citywide. And we fund it through who knows what. You guys talk about that. That's your challenge. Okay. Why am I a raving lunatic about this? Why am I going to make you go walk in the cold to talk about this? Just to be very clear, those are my kids. I told you 16, I've chosen them in time at 3 to 5 to remind you of this. They're the first generation that's going to end up with statistically shorter life expectancies than their parents. Let me say it again. We're raising a generation of kids who are likely to end up with statistically shorter life expectancies than us. Here's the really scary part. It's not like every kid's going to have shorter life expectancies. That burden will, as you can imagine, fall heavily on lower income kids, right? From lower educational households. That's always how it works in our society. So we're going to see such high rates of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, obesity, osteoporosis among our lowest income residents as these chronic disease rates continue to rise based on these risk factors, which are behavioral, physical inactivity, and poor nutrition, that will actually draw down statistical life expectancies, even as our wealthy and our educated continue to live longer. That, to me, is an unfathomable sin for one generation of humanity to not do something about it. We can build healthier cities. We know how. You guys are working on it. That's our goal. So, thank you for your kind attention. You understand why I wanted to do this? I want you to have juicy thoughts in your mind about what we can go do. So our plan is, who's leading us on this walk? Who actually knows the route? Is it Alicia?
Alicia.
Where are you? There she is. So I'm going to tell everybody, there are restrooms nearby. I'm going to remind people, restrooms right here. And we're going to make our way out to the lobby and go for a walk. No, we're going, okay, which way are we heading out? So we're going to go right up these doors. So let's collect with jackets on and everything right here, standing and ready to go. And I will give you your final commands before we walk out the door.